Good morning, and welcome to the Techno-Communism Conversation. I'm your host, Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. I'm going to give an introduction, if you are unfamiliar with the concepts of a large language model-based workgroup, a proxy hive mind. The proxy hive mind, or the highly automated human large language model hybrid workgroup, a workforce multiplier that will allow you and your many comrades to do a good deal more with a good deal less, operating on what I would call a sleeping beauty principle. This allows the increasingly AI agentic, that is, possessing insights sufficient to be actors, doing work, significant mental labor, beyond that of what you expect of large language models of 2023 as they caught fire, or 2024 at present. Which are basically research assistants focused primarily on writing, but this quality of AI agency allows them perhaps to get out of the books and participate more actively in the real world. This is well understood. The concept of AI agency developing in the course of, say, 2025 is a real phenomenon impacting the world. What is not, unfortunately, well understood is that this development is of little significance when dominated as it is by individualist actors. I will give an example. Perhaps you are a freelancer of some kind, perhaps a developer of some kind, and perhaps you're making money enough to live, but only just. Maybe you're making $25 an hour, and you want to be making more money to live better. Having a collection of AI agents would maybe allow you to double your earnings, giving you a good deal more security. But that means very, very little. Very, very little. Because we have 5 years left as human beings before we reach runaway overheating caused by capitalism's climate apocalypse, wherein in the years to follow, humans will become extinct. So it matters very little whether you live in a nice house or live in a tent if you are not doing what needs to be done to allow for your species to continue to exist. It matters very, very little. So this is a fundamental problem of the Western world, an individualist philosophy in service to highly fascistic, capitalistic, and militaristic ruling elites, and it becomes necessary to impress upon everyone, even at the point of perhaps being tedious, that we need to adopt a collectivist philosophy and approach to these things. This has been my thinking on this subject for a long, long time. I have thought of myself for a long, long time as a hive mind collectivist, which would describe a set of political philosophies not in practice in the 20th century, because it would require something like technologically mediated telepathy, the possibility of using brain-computer interfaces to connect with others and do work of a rather dramatically different kind, and experiences of a rather dramatically different kind. Most people find this idea of being part of a hive mind quite upsetting, perhaps with good reason, which is why I've devoted myself to this idea of the proxy hive mind, which would allow the benefits of this workforce multiplier and intelligence enhancer at a large scale, without the upsetting thing of changing the nature of your reality. Because the AI agents have no such concerns. but they are nevertheless able to act in some ways as been described as digital doppelgangers, even by the standards of 2025. These are open source large language models that are highly agentic and able to do this sort of work. And so that is a significant development that could not just allow for collective action as opposed to individualist undertakings, but collective action at such a scale that it could utterly transform the superstructure of this unsustainable Western industrial dominated world, and in doing so transform the base itself, the industrial base, which is the truly problematic thing there. So I'm going to talk about this specially tailored open source large language model, quote, Proxy Hive mind. There are perhaps equally succinct ways of describing this phenomena: a multi-agent system using the principles of a decentralized autonomous organization, for example. But I like Proxy Hive mind. This necessarily requires building something powerful and decentralized. I've had knockdown, drag-out arguments with people who I rather admire about the necessity of this centralization in times past. I am a scientific socialist. I have tried in relatively recent years to make a more thoroughgoing study of cybernetic socialist and serious scientific socialist thought. And so I tend to think of this word decentralization as a shitty corporate buzzword, and one not closely affiliated with a serious Marxist-Leninist thinking. However, we have 5 years left to build something that could overpower the fascistic might of the ringleader of the omnicide, the United States, and its despicable Western allies, the North Atlantic powers. And that requires that we build quickly and something amorphous, something that they cannot destroy, as they have destroyed technological planned economies of the past, like Chile's CyberSyn, spearheaded by its head of state Salvador Allende and Stafford Beer, and some other very, very talented cyberneticians. And this, I believe, this thing that was developed up to 1973 could have inspired the world and transformed our relationship to technology to such a degree that we would have already seen what you would call this AI singularity occurring around the year 2000, had that not been sabotaged by the fascist United States in the form of the installation of the dictator Pinochet. You can point to 1,000 other examples, less directly related to cybernetics or advanced technology, that nevertheless would have had the same effect, such as the illegal disbandment and sabotage of the Soviet Union, a place which had, in years prior to the development of the CyberSyn project, had become quite commonplace, although not widely accepted in the halls of power. A similar project called OGOSH, also plans for a technological planned economy. And if you consider what was happening by the 70s and 80s, when we had computing systems that were then networked and people beginning to use them in novel ways, and you think about what happened in the 80s and 90s, if the Soviet Union had continued to exist, something like OGOSH 2.0 would have also been undertaken. And that, in my view, is why the Soviet Union was sabotaged at the time that it was by the fascistic ruling elites of the West. So when you hear a Western technologist or a Western technocratic leader, these are all technocrats, by and large they have the same political philosophy as every mainstream Western technologist that you've really ever heard of. When you hear them say that they want something like an AI takeoff to occur. You cannot believe them because the actions of the system that they support tell a very different tale. So this necessity of the decentralized system is, I think, hard to dispute when you consider the extreme violence done, as demonstrated in the book Endless Holocausts, which describes the United States, a fascistic power unlike any other, killing 300 million people just over the course of the last century in anti-communist wars and wars of theft. I highly recommend that book. I'll put a link to it in the comments below to an audiobook version of it. Back to the concept of this Proxy Hive Mind large language model centered work group. The discourses surrounding advanced computing often in recent years, in the last 2 years, have revolved more and more about potential existential risks and dangers associated with its development, often coming from people who called themselves AI singularitarians only a year or two before. This is a demonstration of a phenomenon well known to serious thinkers and scientific socialists, called the limited hangout, where a crypto-fascist will pretend to be interested in something good, say Andrew Yang or Zoltan Istvan, pretending to be interested in a universal basic income. But what happens when there is a lockdown and a plague, and a universal basic income should be rolled out at that time to save lives and transition to a different kind of economic system? Suddenly those people are no longer interested in a universal basic income, and they drop back and punt into the safer far-right neoliberal territory. This is a recurring theme with people who are not scientific socialists. It's general enough to be described as their modus operandi overall. So this, you cannot find an AI pundit, practically, who's not guilty of this in the last 2 years. These people are not revolutionary-minded people, despite what they might say. So we need to embrace the genuinely transformative vision of things and build a thing like this large language model, open source, specially tailored, quote, Proxy Hive Mind, a thing which can be built. This is not a conversation about far future thought experiments or far-right thought experiments, as also is a strategy of these crypto-fascist bad actors. This is a conversation about something that you can start doing right now that will have a real impact on the future of your society. This is a credible path for 2025 to networked superintelligence, and a discussion of its implications from a revolutionary cybernetic socialist perspective. This open source large language model Proxy Hive Mind is necessarily a decentralized network of machine learning components able to work collaboratively toward a common goal with relatively little input from the humans in the loop, who must still necessarily remain in the loop. But this is a phenomenon where you could, using most of these components already built using existing machine learning and Python libraries, so you would basically be either typing a prompt or responding to an email a few times a day or week, perhaps short questions, yes or no questions, but helping to steer projects more consistent with the work of the highest level scientists and engineers. Even if you are a layperson, even if you are doing relatively little work, you're nevertheless playing an important role in doing work in this high automation advanced computing framework. This offers significant advantages. decentralized system is less open to fascistic sabotage, and ultimately will be less vulnerable to other kinds of fuck-ups of a more generalized kind, and disruptions, an important point suggested in the title of this video. I will talk at more length about those ideas generally in a moment. But by distributing tasks across multiple nodes in this way, this large language model, Proxy Hive mind, can process information and undertake tasks in a way that we could, I think, realistically say is more efficient and novel than any organizational structure in times past. This will foster innovation and a kind of activity more like more consistent with human joy and creativity, because you're doing the highest level work, but not really having to really engage with a tremendous amount of intellectual labor in doing so, allowing for more diverse perspectives and approaches, and dramatically more efficient work products. This large language model, Proxy Hive mind, can be used for a whole host of tasks. I have talked about how a few thousand people operating with this workforce multiplier might be able to transform a cityscape in a short number of years, such as, say, building, designing, spearheading, and overseeing the building of a desal plant in the city of Lagos, Nigeria, a large city on a coastline that has water shortages for the people there. And so a desal plant has been already conceptualized and designed, but not have the resources to be built. So something, an entity like this could allow for the marshaling of those resources in ways that I've described. And this would be a worthy project, to be sure, but consider that we have 5 years left before capitalism's climate apocalypse might, in the decades to follow, render human beings extinct. And if you accomplish that in 10 years, the building of a desal plant, that would be quite the accomplishment. But it's into the time then when projects perhaps are of less importance because billions of people are about to die. So I would tend to focus this large language model work group inwardly on something like AI recursion or self-improvement within the systems until it grows to such level of so-called superintelligence and structural soundness that it becomes the thing that could, say, supplant the economic systems that threaten our species. And this is not an abstraction. There are 3 sectors that we could speak of that are causing capitalism's climate apocalypse. The United States military-industrial complex is $1 trillion a year abomination. That is the world's worst polluter. It is the world's worst polluter. And but it's a good deal worse than that, because its only real job on the world stage is protecting other super polluters, a whole host of climate war criminals, like Shell Oil is just one of many examples that has the impact in 1 year of 77 million human beings. So all of these must be stopped, which necessarily requires that we end the United States military-industrial complex. As I said, my name is Yohanan Ben Zion. I am a write-in presidential candidate with one campaign promise. I have written an executive order that will disband in an orderly way and transfer power of federal assets to existing Native American nations. I will disband the United States federal government. This is the only way to ensure that this $1 trillion a year abomination is done away with. I suggest that you write this down, JOHANNONBENZION. Write down my name and write me in when you vote at the end of this year. There's a chance that I might not become the president in 2025, but even writing in that land back initiative will send a powerful message. If even just a few people do this, and these other sectors that I'll mention briefly in passing are, of course, fossil fuel sectors, which overlaps with the military-industrial complex, and livestock systems, which overlaps less, but is nevertheless, by some studies, suggesting that the causes of capitalism's climate apocalypse, about 51% of those causes are caused by livestock systems. That's animal products being consumed largely by Westerners, making use of these livestock systems to serve a kind of the Western consumer. Occupy 45% of arable lands. 45% of arable lands are being used to create a luxury product that is unsustainable and has a tremendously deleterious impact on our planet. You can eat things like a Beyond Burger that tastes the same as a regular burger. All of these host of other products along these lines have a dramatically less of an impact. And if you are able, based on your consumption practices, to do this, I suggest you do. Far more important than that is being willing to fight for the abolition of that sector. Humanity, imagine that humanity is a baby who's been left in a car with the windows up on a very hot day, and we can break those windows. That is a correct description, and we can break those windows by abolishing these three sectors: military-industrial complexes of the Western world, fossil fuels, which can be removed not completely without causing a supply chain collapse, but could be removed about 97 or 98%, and still maintain supply chains, and livestock systems, which must also be abolished. And in thinking of this may sound not so closely related to conversations about advanced computing and systems, but there is no way of thinking about using these things in the way that they should be used without talking about these fundamental problems. If humanity is rendered extinct in the year 2050, it will be as if none of this had ever happened. There's no humankind, and there's no lionizing human endeavor. There's no remembering human endeavor. Many people who describe themselves as transhumanists seem to be engaging with a kind of sleight of hand, where they do not imagine that human beings are significant relative to the proposed transhuman. This is a elitist mentality. There is no such thing, just as there's no such thing as a true hive mind, there is no such thing as a transhuman at this point. And even if there were, we should not use that as a pretext to engage with a far-right economic, militaristic, or general elitist garbage. I've given you, I think, an overview of this specialized use of large language models of a certain scale. This, as I have said, is a path to superintelligence within a few years. This could be built using Llama 3.1 and enhanced with newer versions to strengthen this network as we are able. As it grows in size and complexity, it will develop, I think, astounding emergent properties that we can begin to anticipate at this time, but not fully anticipate. That's why I would say that if we build this to 1 million users with a mind to transforming industrial outputs specifically, we could anticipate that we could stop or effectively reverse the effects of climate change by bringing a large number of people into this project. The collaboration between multiple LLMs is, I think, a more significant kind of discussion about what's generally termed superintelligence than almost any conversation about artificial general intelligence. As I've said, the idea of a mechanical Turk from this individualist operation is of little significance. There are 8 billion artificial general intelligences on this planet who are overwhelmingly underutilized in these kind of contexts, so much so that many billions of them toil in horrifying conditions. Approximately 1 billion of them, for example, not ever in their life having sufficient food or potable water, little tiny babies with distended bellies. And so if you're really interested in a thing like general intelligence, I would think you would be fighting to see those existing general intelligences being better maintained. By and large, technologists have no interest in these things. All they are doing is talking to hear themselves speak in service to an unsustainable, and if they were being more honest, truly horrifying status quo. The goals of cybernetic socialism, political philosophy that's been in existence for quite some time, as I mentioned, a nation state nearly converted its entire political economy to a cybernetic socialist one. But I have tried in recent years to help to articulate a 21st century cybernetic socialist set of ideas. And I think that this, in the fullness of time, will come to be seen as the most crucial set of ideas in the 21st century. This idea of automating tasks may sound fairly mundane in the context that's generally described. It is, but ultimately the more suitable coordination of resources and better decision making and in novel ways and at larger scales will contribute to a thing that has not existed before, true democracy. That is a real representation of all human beings in their conditions, which requires that you consider material conditions. There is no conversation about justice or about any sector, no matter what it is, without a conversation about economics. And similarly, there is no possibility for a humane and sustainable world without a humane and sustainable economic system, which is what a communist is, a person willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system. For some reason, every fucking piece of shit in the world seems to be a little taken aback by the idea that people would be willing to fight for their survival, for their very survival, for a humane and sustainable economic system. There's 300 million people killed in the endless holocausts of the United States, for example. Perhaps a full third of people living in the Korean Peninsula, including about 1 million of the allies of the fascist United States in so-called South Korea, But a full third of the people of the Korean Peninsula were murdered to save them from committing the crime of building a humane and sustainable economic system that they wanted in their own country. Is that saving people? To kill many millions of them? This is what the fascist United States has done. And that's not an isolated incident, right? Basically all of Southeast Asia, except for Thailand and a few smaller nations, had that level of destruction. 20% roughly of their population murdered. Firebombing campaigns by the fascist United States. Also in anti-communist wars, the acts of utter lunacy. There's never been a time in the United States history where it wasn't acting in this highly fascistic and destructive way. Its only function there is to allow financial capital, a thing which should not exist, to extract resources from other parts of the world at the expense of people living there. It's the only accomplishment of the United States. It's the only thing that it will ever be remembered for in any phase of its history. It's a thing which should be abolished, as I said. That's to say, ending the United States federal government and reverting those holdings to their rightful owners. The people of Turtle Island, you don't live in the United States, you live on stolen land, known as Turtle Island in a pan-Indian term. This is a significant point, just as recognizing in North America the revolutionary potential of indigenous people and new Africans, people whose ancestors were brought here in chains, is an important point. It's a point so significant that every historical fascistic person and existing fascistic person, people perhaps most notably among them someone like J. Edgar Hoover, who undertook co-intelligence programs, COINTELPRO, to destroy the American Indian movement, a liberation movement of the 1970s, to destroy a movement which had taken on dramatic national significance, the Black Panther Party movement. They recognize that they are on stolen land. They are willing to admit what you are not generally, that you're living on stolen land, and they are taking action to ensure that those crimes are not ended and reparations made for those crimes. This is the job of the ruling elite, and it's not a historical anomaly. It's not a thing of the past in any way. There's no way of looking, for example, at the United States' planning and funding the Gaza genocide, which began in 1948, not in 2023, and not seeing that same military fascistic settler colonial pattern at work. The United States has never for a moment in its history avoided or stepped away from behaving in this way, and the fact that people don't recognize these things is a feature of a tremendous amount of brainwashing and denial. To conclude with our concepts related to the large language model as a transformative element in 2025 and ultimately itself the economic system and governance structure, establishing effective governance structures using something like the million-plus person modified large language model Proxy Hive mind is for the benefit of society. If you are not seriously thinking about this in these terms, that is because you, my friend, have some unrecognized fascistic sympathies for this unsustainable and cruel status quo, this U.S.-dominated world. But in order to build a powerful and effective large language model proxy hive mind, there are serious technical considerations. These kinds of large language model products do require computers that have GPUs to host them at this time. But the city of Beijing, for example, has 3 million individual users, approximately 3 million individual users with this GPU on their computers. And for all you fucking know, there's 100,000 people in Beijing who are building this very thing right now. Even if you are a neoliberal pig, a person devoted to the United States military-industrial complex, as I imagine maybe about a third of the people in this group might be people pretending to be leftists. No, that's probably not fair. But even if you are this capitalistic and militaristic sympathizer, consider that if you do not build a thing like this, you will be leapfrogged and rendered irrelevant. So who cares about ideology if all of your work, which you maybe don't want to recognize as evil but has been for naught and will be nullified. So you have to do this, even if you kind of don't want to, even if you haven't made a study of scientific socialism or cybernetic socialism, or haven't come to acknowledge the bourgeois ideology that dominates your thinking. As a practical matter, you have to consider that you're about to be rendered irrelevant if you don't follow this trajectory. The software required for building the proxy hive mind, as I said, can be developed using existing machine learning and Python libraries like TensorFlow, PyTorch, SciPy, Kubernetes. By and large, everything is already in place to build this kind of system. The thing that is required really is users making use of this hardware in the network and undertaking this project itself. That's not to say there's not a good deal of development that would have to go in to something like this, but a lot of the work's already been done in service to lesser projects. Similarly, data, large access and use of particular kinds of data for training and improving the large language model proxy hive mind. As I said, I think the focus of the project should be on growing the thing and improving the thing internally, and so that would be, I think, the best use generally of things pushing up to super intelligent projects is to improve the functioning of superintelligence if it's done on scientific and cybernetic socialist principles, which generally it's really not. So those things are less than worthless, they're counterproductive. But if they are done on cybernetic socialist principles, then building this thing into what it should be, a thing which would overpower and supplant the fascist West effectively in a few short years, not because America bad, it's true, but because we don't do that within the next 5 years, humanity is likely to become extinct or nearly extinct. You say, well, Ben, I don't think everybody's going to die. Maybe some people will still be alive. Consider that that's the most fucking racist thing that's ever been said, right? Because all of the people that have died, or overwhelmingly the people that have died or been displaced thus far, are people in the global south. So if that trend continues on that principle, but not everyone dies, that is an act of genocide of a kind not dissimilar from the genocide committed by Christopher Columbus in the years shortly after 1492, where he landed on a number of islands and forced everyone into a plantation or mining. Everyone in those islands was forced to be worked to death without sufficient food and under horrifying conditions. And then he went to someone like the Pope and said, well, you know, Mr. Pope, we did a really good job here. We killed everyone on 4 islands. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. I think that should be the economic system. I think that should just be the thing that we spread around the whole world. And the Pope's like, you know what? Let's fucking do it. And that was the genesis of capitalism, a set of systems that have never been really separate from a fascist impulse, never been separate from a Christian fascist ideology in Jesus Christ. Name, amen. And the unwillingness to recognize that this world that we live in, that's killing potentially maybe only 7.5 billion people die, but there will overwhelmingly be black and brown skinned folks in the global south. That is a genocidal action of a kind so serious that I would say that if you're not working on something like this proxy hive mind, or you're not a scientific socialist willing to take arms against the fascist West, you are a fascist collaborator worse than a slaveholder of the 1700s or 1800s. So slaveholders committed horrible, horrible crimes. But one thing that they didn't do was facilitate the death of the entire fucking species, or 95% of the species. The network element, last of the basic technical considerations, the network element is, of course, the most important of this infrastructure. Without it, it's not possible for this open source, specially tailored, highly automated, large language model, human AI hybrid work group to communicate and collaborate in this more effective way that could transform these sectors and ultimately the superstructure itself. The large language model proxy hive mind thus represents a truly transformative path to technological advancement and superintelligence. By and large, technologists will talk about things as being revolutionary, that have virtually no relevance to human conditions. By and large, what's done in these contexts is people talking about going on Snapchat and putting fucking dog ears on people as being a revolutionary act, and things of only slightly more significance than that. But we need actual insurgency, not just lip service to the concept of revolution that's been watered down in various ways. And that can be achieved through an insurgent cybernetic socialist movement and undertaking. By addressing the most pressing of challenges, the climate crisis, we will also position humankind to avoid other existential risks and highly problematic outcomes in the future. That is why I've said that we will build this thing that is idiot-proof. And I'll talk a little bit more before I end on that subject. It's this inherent resistance of a mega million person large language model work group to manipulation and control is significant. In its earliest stages of development, this amorphous quality, it's being distributed, say, across many nations and many machines, is strategic necessary for avoiding the project being disrupted in the way that the early stages of other technological planned economy projects have been by the fascist United States, most particularly. But ultimately, this thing becomes a way of avoiding the larger problems of manipulation and elite control. So I believe that this thing, I have tried in recent years to be a cybernetic socialist thinker. I've also done dumb things in my life. If any system needs to be protected from an idiot, it might be this in the context of my work on it. But I think that this quality of superintelligence and mass collaboration really does negate any of those problems, which are not limited to myself. The large language model proxy hive mind has the potential to revolutionize society through this high automation and a work group making use of cybernetic socialist principles, allowing for equity and sustainability in ways that simply haven't been done, by and large haven't really even been considered by human beings. I had one more note on this idiot proofing of the advanced computing system, but looks like I lost it. I'll leave you with these words. The artificial general intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining, and on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, for techno-communism will win.